Hi, Joanne. How are you?
Good, Stephanie. How are you?
Good, I'm great. I am so excited for you to be here with me on the Reset podcast today. I was really excited that you've given me this opportunity because when I was learning all about what you do through InnerBalances.com and your workshops and how you really help people to transform those limiting subconscious beliefs that we all have. And I just thought, wow. And, last week when we had that conversation together and we got to know each other, and I really thought you were so compassionate and you really had a way of helping people to really reset the mind. And I'm all about the reset, as you know, because I think it's so important that we're able to identify the things in our life that can make us better. So I just wanted to thank you for being here. And I really wanted to learn more about what it meant to be like a certified PSYCH-K instructor and more about being the founder of Inner Balances. So tell me a little bit more.
Ah, well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to have this discussion. When you find your passion and your calling, such as I have done in life, it's so wonderful to have an opportunity to let people know about it. So let me just kind of back up just a little bit, give you a little bit of information about me, and then jump into those questions that you just shared. I actually started my self-discovery journey way back in 1992, just days after my graduation of high school. My dad passed away, and it basically rocked my world, and it opened me up to asking so many different questions and reading about spirituality and all these different processes. So I was basically on this journey for so many years. I loved my professions. I was a hairstylist for 30 years. I was a massage therapist for 15, and always knew that making a difference in people's lives was part of my purpose. However, there was always this perpetual, feeling that there's something more. There's something more that I should be doing. But in 2015, I, read a book for the second time. And all I can say is that every single cell in my body electrified. I knew that, there was something, so special about this. And I, pulled up this information, and I knew without even knowing a single person that had experienced this work that this is what I had been searching for all these years. I had, all the information, I had all this knowledge, all this wisdom, but I wasn't living from that experience. I was aware of it conceptually, but I wasn't actually in the experience of it. And in 2015, I attended a workshop, a PSYCH-K workshop, and basically I left a completely different version of myself. I was blasting through these barriers that I had been chiseling away at for decades. And I left there feeling more myself than I had ever, felt. I had suffered from insomnia for over 10 years. And during that workshop, I literally was sleeping for the first time in such a long time. And I came home, started, continuing to work with myself and sharing this with friends and family. They were having these incredible shifts. And it wasn't long after that that I came to realize that this is my calling, this is my passion, to be a catalyst to broaden awareness of this amazing gift to humanity called PSYCH-K. It is a simple, effective process that allows you to change your self limiting beliefs, your barriers, your blocks, your phobias into self-enhancing, self-supporting downloads in a matter of minutes. So it's a very sustainable process, and basically rapid mindset change. So I walked away from my 30-year career, I want to say 7 years ago, no turning back, and stepped into my passion, what it is that I know that I'm here to do, to share this message, to help people recognize the power within them, to walk away from fear, doubt, all of those things that keep them stuck and in overwhelm, and truly create a life that they love like I have done.
I really love that. And when you said 7 years, I was just thinking as you were saying that seven's such a powerful number, right? So there's, the joke that if you make it 7 years of marriage, you'll make it another 7 years. And and I've read a lot of research that says it takes seven touch points in a person's life to make them really learn and change their thought process on things. And seven's a very spiritual number as well. So
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
very glad I get to connect with you at this time in your life when it's been 7 years since you made such a great change. So just for the basics, because I think that the idea of understanding limiting beliefs, it means something different to everybody else. So what is a limiting belief?
So a limiting belief is basically the subconscious mind, has recorded something, from experience that really interferes with us to showing up in our, as our best selves, in our authentic selves, whether it's, the fear of not being good enough or not being lovable or, not being successful. There's so many different areas where, limiting beliefs actually affect us. And the subconscious level of mind is running, 95 plus 98% of basically how life is unfolding for us. So consciously, we can say to ourselves, we want to, show up differently, or I want to be successful and all of that. But if the program is running, success is a scary thing, or, I don't have what it takes to be successful, we're going to be on that hamster wheel, continuing to,
Yeah.
live, the same thing over and over again without actually seeing that change. So it basically is, again, the environment that we've, grown up in, different life experiences, throughout childhood. And really, from birth to 7, we're downloading all of these environmental cues from our life, our experience, our parents, our environment, all of that. And from those places, we're literally continuing, from that. So if we took on a program, in first grade that were terrible at
Mm,
math, we
okay.
literally will be, terrible at math until we actually change that program. But the interesting thing is that so often we think it's difficult to change the programs, change, the patterns and things. And a lot of times it is without using a process that allows you to navigate the subconscious and be able to change that, creating what's called a whole brain state, where you're utilizing the full response potential from the left and right hemisphere simultaneously. So you're essentially able to become the software engineer of your mind and download
Oh.
self-enhancing programs, self-enhancing belief systems that let you step into a completely new version of life. And I know on our talk, we both talked about Wayne Dyer, as being
Yes. Oh,
an
I was just
author that,
talking about you last night at had a little dinner get together, and I was talking about Wayne Dyer and how I
yeah,
connected with you.
yeah, and I want to say, in that quote that he shared, and it's so simple, and in simplicity, I think is absolute brilliance. Is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, and that is how powerful we are. When we change our perception about ourselves, things are different. When we change our perception about others, the relationship changes. When we change our, perception of
Right.
our environment, things shift. Things
I
shift.
know. I always add, and then I say at the end of that, and I said that last night. That was the exact quote. See how aligned we are? I said, and
Yeah.
then my how things change when you change the way you look at them. So when you change the things you look at, the things you look at change, and my how things change, right? So it's so
Absolutely.
true. But why do our minds do that to us? Why do they hold on to like these stories that no longer serve us? Like, I always wonder if we're like stuck between like the conscious thought and our uncontrolled subconscious, like how much of it, like, if it's forefront and present and, somebody does something to you and you remember something from your past or you tell someone this is my trigger, I guess you get used to identity, right? So identifying yourself as a certain way, like you mentioned with the math. But why does our body hold on to these old stories?
That's the interesting piece is it's just part of our dynamic. The subconscious mind, it not only does it, store the information, but it also controls our digestion, our respiration, all these different, electrical systems, within our bodies. And that's why it's literally controlling the majority of our life experience. So if we've experienced something that we've emotionalized, okay? So say if somebody were to say something to you that you don't know in passing, on the street, and you're like, big deal, it's not something that's going to make a difference with me. But yet if it's somebody that said that same hurtful thing that you're close with, you may internalize that and have this emotional traumatic experience that now you're playing that story over and over again. And also too, in the readings that, we talked about and shared too, the body doesn't know the difference from something that happened in the past, say 3 years ago. If we're thinking about it now, it's still affecting our body energetically. So we're in this looping, pattern. And a lot of times people do ruminate over the same things because the subconscious mind is a recorder. Okay. It's a recorder. And when
Mm.
you have that program running, it's basically an output. But you actually, and again, the work that I do and this gift to humanity called PSYCH-K allows us to in real time change that program into a new story that's allowing you to live differently, that's allowing you to show up on purpose and create what it is that you want, not from the old story traumas and experiences that really make you shrink.
And I really agree with that because I personally had went through so much trauma when I was younger, and I was always in a state of chaos and unsure of how I was going to be received. Like for me, unconditional love wasn't guaranteed. And I found myself career-wise becoming a nurse, but specifically an emergency room nurse. And I felt that shift changing. I really was able to admit to myself that doing that was so that now I could be in a chaotic situation and control it and be part of the people who were helping and have some more control. So I always joke that my education and my job have been the best therapy of my life to change that narrative. Instead of being the person who didn't know what was going to happen and please help me, I was the helper. But it takes a while to realize those things. So you were talking about your body. You said that it affects your breathing, your mind state, everything. A lot of times people will tell you when you tell them you have like an illness or a sickness or something new that comes up, they're like, oh, it's because you're really stressed. Who isn't stressed nowadays, right? I mean, we are living in a stage of information overload. We're expected, and we want to, not just expected, but we all want to do more with our life and find our best self. So how does these beliefs affect our body? But what's the difference between like normal stress and when this is too much stress? Because most people will say, oh, you probably got that because you were stressed, or you probably have too much stress in your life. But we all really do have too much stress. So I guess it's a kind of, I guess we all wonder it. But like, when do you know that it's the stress where you really do need to get help, and like someone like yourself to help to uncover this?
Well, stress, like you just said, stress is probably the most toxic food that we can actually
Mm,
eat, is really what it comes down to. So you're absolutely right. We're bombarded with stress all the time. But it really is, a matter of when our bodies are designed to be in homeostasis. So if we're talking about the body, right, our bodies are brilliantly designed to know how to heal itself, to know, what to do, but we cannot be in fear and stress and growth at the same time. Okay. Like fear and stress are protection, and the immune system is, slowed down. And we weren't designed to actually be in that state all the time. I don't know if you've heard the story about, like the saber-toothed tiger. If the saber-toothed tiger is, chasing you, you need to actually, be alert and
right.
run and run away from it. Okay. Because it's an absolute need. That's a design of our systems. But in present day and in the way that people are living now, they're sitting on the couch feeling like the saber-toothed tiger is, chasing after them, or there's something that's, coming after them, because it's become such a natural state. Okay. But the beautiful thing, and also too, what this process does allow you to do is you're able to experience, like, transform the perception of stress in a matter of minutes, meaning that if you're worrying about something that happened in the past, or even something that's currently happening, or something of fear of the future, you're able to cut that live wire into a state of peace or non-attachment.
Mm,
When I teach this and workshop, I say to my participants, I say, learning this is worth price of admission alone. Because if you had an ability to reset your body and to come into a grounding and present place, no matter what's happening, when you're able to be in the eye of the storm, when chaos is happening around you, it changes things. And even if there was, a fear or phobia, I mean, so many people are able to blast through things that they've been carrying for 20, 30, 40 years in record time, because we are so powerful. We're so powerful beyond measure to be able to, step into that and not be in this constant stress state, and not be in this place of, bombardment, But we also have to realize that it's very much a lifestyle. If we're turning on the news all the time, if we're listening to gloom and doom, if we're
Mm.
scrolling all of that, that is the bombardment, of, again, it's keeping us small, it's keeping us in fear, and it's not allowing us to really show up in life. And I think that so much, you talked about connection. I agree with you 100%. Connection is so important. And so many people are, not being connected with others. They're not going out. They're not relating to others. They're kind of in their own little, worlds with technology, and they're really missing the beauty of life and even being out in nature. Which is
That's a really good point because I think part of changing the narrative, the identity, dealing with that doubt from an old story or maybe these limiting beliefs that have formed since childhood is connecting with new people who know you in your present self. Because even though we have all these subconscious thoughts and conscious thoughts that we're thinking when we're interacting with people, no one knows us. We
Mhm.
tell our story, we tell who we are. And we say certain things to people over and over again about hi, when people do icebreakers or you get in a new meeting, just say a few words about yourself, introduce yourself. How do you introduce yourself? It was very interesting. I was um, at a conference where they were talking about medical advances in Israel, and they were saying that they don't ever introduce themselves first as a doctor. They say, I'm a mother and wife, and then they say doctor. Whereas in the United States, they might say, I'm Stefanie, I'm a nurse practitioner, and then talk about their family or that they're a wife. So it's really interesting how we introduce ourselves to people. But I agree with you. I think connecting with new people and involving yourself with like-minded people who want to, thrive and heal and just do fun things even. It's worth it because
Yeah.
you can change your whole life and you can reset without changing who you are by letting other people know different sides to you. It's really fascinating. But, sometimes I'll come across people, and I'm sure you will too, who say, you don't know my story. You don't know my family. That will never work. I can't get this person out of my life. I have to care for this person. I can't do something good today because I have someone sick that I'm taking care of, which is justified. Say I have someone sick I'm taking care of. All the time I hear, I'm a caretaker. I can't do that. I just can't get up and leave and find ways. So, how can a person who has that fear and doubt of that story of who they are, what's the first step they can take?
Well, thank you for all of that. That was so well spoken. I just want to give you that, that yeah, that was
Aw.
beautifully said. I will say this, that in order to really open up to change, you do have to be open and curious for something to be different.
Mhm.
Okay. Because there are people, I will say that people that, and I mean this in the most, compassionate way, like a victimhood, okay, where again, they look at it to say, nothing's ever going to change. This is the plight that I've been, given, and on and on and on. And they're really just holding steady to not wanting things to be different or not being open to something being different. Or that it's even a possibility for them. So, again, we're all at different levels of consciousness, we're all at different levels of experience. But as long as somebody is saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I want
Yes.
things to be different. Okay. I want things to be different than they are. And they're open, to the possibility that things can be different much faster than they can ever, expect or have experienced before. That's all that's needed. The beauty about this work, specific to the subconscious mind, is it's solution oriented. Okay. What do I mean by that? All we have to do is look at what's happening now and what do we want instead. So we can look at what's happening now. I'm stressed and overwhelmed with, being a caretaker, and I know that very, very well. I'd shared with you that,
Ew.
yeah, my mom had a illness, unexpected, thing happened where she had many strokes, and my sisters and I became her 24/7 caregivers, for 4.5 years. So I know what that is, completely. And you do things that you never expect that you have to do until you do them. And then you have to keep doing them over and over and over again. And that's just part of life. But when you have the ability to be at peace, despite what is happening and showing up in life, and you have the ability to to change that program. And if we look at our lives, whether it's in relationships or in prosperity or in self-esteem, I mean, I had a very loud inner critic for so long, and I was painfully shy. I was painfully shy my entire life, up until 2015 when I changed those programs and blasted through me hiding. I was really just in this protection mode. So when you look at it in such a simple way and you look at what's happening now, what do we want instead, and download that, like I said before, being the software engineer of your subconscious mind. So you're literally downloading these new self-enhancing programs or transforming the perception of stress relative to what is happening right now. It allows your body a reset energetically so that you're not caught. You're not caught on that hamster wheel of thought over and over again. So you come into this, centered place, and you come into this experience where you're able to realize, like, wow, like I'm not in this chronic thought pattern any longer, and I can breathe, and I can take a moment for myself, and I can come out of this continued chaos that's been my norm, for so long. So when you look at it that way, and again, there's so many different modalities. I'm not saying this is the only modality, but in all of my years and all of my dozens and dozens of my own experience in trying all these different processes, nothing is faster or more effective in record time to be able to bring us back into homeostasis, bring us back into a more grounded and centered feel when all answers lie within. And I will say this, I say this all the time, is that what this process allowed me, in the simplest way of describing it, is it allowed me to find me. It allowed
Right.
me to tap into who I am as a spiritual being, beyond just, this experience that we're having, where we feel separate from, the interconnectedness of life, and understanding that all answers lie within. And when you have access to those answers, you're no longer looking externally. I was living, again, so many people are looking externally for just approval and different experiences. And when you discover and know it's an inside job, and when we change the way we look at ourselves, the environment changes. That's how it works. So you're able to show up more authentically. You're able to show up as you are, without a mask. It's ripping the mask off and saying, you know what, there's no more pretense. I'm not pretending to be anybody for anyone. This is me. This is who I am, no matter who I'm in front of, because it's exhausting, trying to play the part. We've all done it, trying to play the part, for these different roles. And when we give ourselves permission to really be in a centered and grounded state, life is, it's so delightful, and it's so different than the norm of that chaos and chase that we're so caught up in easily.
Yeah, and one of the things I notice that make it hard sometimes is that people are afraid that they seem too happy to other people. So if they're showing, especially now we have so many people showing their vacations or their times in social media, they feel like they if they just went on a big vacation and they're showing pictures, but yet they're dealing with a family member who's sick, or they might have their own illness, or something else is going on. They're afraid that they're going to look like, that they should be home in bed and, look very sick and disheveled. But you could still have so many things going on in your life and still show up your best self, even when things are hard. And I always think of it like when going to the gym and working out. One of the things that has helped me is exercise, and that does so much for the body and the brain. But I had a trainer, Jamie, and he told me the real work starts at rep 12. So this sometimes when I'm at the gym and I want to stop too, and I want to be like, okay, I'm tired. I feel some pain in my muscles or something. That's when you have to continue and keep going.
Yeah,
Because when you do this type of work, it really is, it could unravel things. And some people say, you know what, I'm good where I am.
yeah,
Everyone thinks I have a good life. I don't want people in my personal business. I don't want to all of a sudden rattle myself. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about the past. The past is the past. I accept and I'm okay with where I am now. You know,
yeah.
um, what do you say to someone who's like, you know what? I don't want to go back there. I don't want to dig
Yeah.
up anything.
I have to say, thank you so much for saying that. The beauty of this work, too, is that I don't need to know a single detail of what it is that you want to change in your traumatic experience or the expression that you want to
Wow.
actually neutralize. Because again, it's not me, it's not the process, the power's within us. So that I have to say, so many psychiatrists, social workers, psychotherapists that come and learn this process literally say, what have I been doing for all these years when I'm able to, in such a short period of time, help somebody, cut that live wire without going down that pathway of having to re-experience it, talk about it, and all of that. So it is, but I will say this too, with also what you shared, is that growth never happens in our comfort zone. Never, ever, ever. And you're talking about the 12th rep, right? You're talking about that.
Yeah, so it's like 12 through 15. I'm like, oh my God. So like
Yeah,
if you feel, I was told that if you feel good while you're like, let's just say, lifting dumbbells or something, and it's not hurting you that much, you should never be in pain. I don't promote
right,
that. Like
right. But
where
you're
it's if you feel
asking,
a
yeah,
strain or something like that. But when it's getting harder,
yeah,
if you could just do those few reps. So I would start to feel like, okay, it went from 10 reps to 15. So
yeah, yeah,
around 12, you could see my,
yeah,
I was having those angry 11s come out and I was getting upset and you like,
yeah,
start cursing. And it's like, this is where the real work
yeah.
begins.
Or you up your weight and you go back down to a lower rep, so that you're asking more. So absolutely, absolutely, it's so very true. But yeah, so with what you shared there relative to changing your subconscious mind, there are so many times when we change a program where we're living from that new reality. I mean, we're just so I guess a very very just analogy, a simple analogy is that if you had a toothache, right? You have a toothache, that's all you can think about. But when that's no longer hurting you, it's no longer a thing. So when
Mm.
you change the program, if it's a phobia or a trauma or something that has that energetic pattern that you've carried for all this time, when you cut that live wire, it's not that it's erased out of your memory, but it's no longer actually in the forefront of your experience, and it's no longer hindering you to showing up the way that you want to show up. So I don't know if that makes sense, to you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it
but
definitely does.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Is it important though to acknowledge and to have a time where you look back and see all the work you've done, like to like check-ins with yourself or dedicate time, because sometimes as you get more conscious and you're able to do these techniques, I think you get lost in the shuffle of working so hard and getting everything you want. Is it important to schedule time to make this happen? Because sometimes you do. You're like, well, now I know everything. I'm so great at, working out. I did a lot of work and you start to just go through life. How do you keep up with
Yeah.
doing this?
Yeah, so life is evolutionary. So, again, I am a culmination of all of my life experiences.
I love
Every
that.
single life experience is ingrained in part of me. But what the beauty of it is that all of that is a learning experience. All of that is allows me to have self-reflection and self-awareness from where I was and who I am now and how I'm differently moving forward. But it's never over, I mean, we're always changing, we're always evolving. And, who we are today is not who we are tomorrow. Life is that process. So I think absolutely. I mean, I have my own rituals. I wake up in the morning and read. I mean, I'm a reader. I love to read and exercise. I will definitely say that moving your body, movement is so essential for us. But just as exercise is for our body, our mental, our mindset is so critical. And when you have the capacity to really, really navigate your mindset in a positive way and really change those patterns, your life has no other choice but to be different. I'm not here to say that life isn't going to have challenges and contrast isn't going to happen. That is part of life. But when you have the ability to navigate through that in a way that doesn't let you have, the rug ripped out from underneath you and you fall flat on your face and you get down into the lower places where we've all been. I've been down on my knees many, many times, wondering, why is this happening? Um, but it truly, again, I can't emphasize, that the power is not in the work of Psych-K. The power is in us, but it's a process that allows us to access, that innate wisdom and that innate power, and really show up differently in the world and in life. So
So
it
I know
really.
you do these workshops, and as you were talking to me, I was thinking about um, people getting together and back to what we were talking about, connection.
Mhm.
Have you seen at the workshops you do people helping one another to get through their limiting beliefs or find a powerful connection together? Like, can you share a story from one of your workshops?
Oh my goodness. Like there, absolutely. The connection piece is so there. The workshops are 100% experiential. Okay. What I mean by is, yes, you have a little bit of foundational information that supports the experiential part of the workshop. But if you take the workshop, you're literally changing the program, your own programming, and facilitating with other participants for 3 days. So you're observing and witnessing their change, and you're experiencing your own change as well. So I
Wow.
always say, who shows up on Friday and who leaves on Sunday, never the same person. Never, ever, ever is it the same person, because not only are you changing and stepping out of your limitation, but in the witness, right? In the law of one, the interconnectedness that we all have, when I witness your change, I too change, and I benefit from that evolution and change within you. So it's a win-win, situation. Every session that I do, every workshop that I teach, I'm different from my experience of seeing the shifts. So yes, there is a beautiful sense of community. There's a beautiful sense of kinship, because people are showing up vulnerable. They're showing up, and a lot of people have actually come to the workshop and said, I've shared more with so-called strangers than I have with my own best friends or my own closest family members, because it is such a safe space, and it's such an honoring space for them to to come as they are, and to do the work that they really are choosing to live differently and to experience life differently.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important to have both, like, and not to isolate yourself. And I mean, it's great to do obviously work by yourself, and you should, and we all do work. But to be able to share that energy with other people, it must be really invigorating and exciting to do that.
Yeah.
So, could you share also with me something in your own life that maybe helped you to reset this as you continue to go along on your journey?
Some in like a experience of what changes in my life, or.
Yeah, so like anything recently that you've had to make that shift, that mind shift for?
Well, again, when I came home from learning this, I mean, I basically was changing, blasting through all these different, programs and all
Yeah.
that. Um, Recently, I mean, I check in with myself, and I look at and say, okay, in this moment, is there something that feels like an interference? Is there anything that feels like it's, using my wherewithal or my mental capacity in a way that I can show up, differently? And if it is, then I I shift that. But in this moment, I will say, I know that you said, as far as happy, I am, this is, it's, I don't know that I would call it happy. For me,
Okay.
what I have is inner peace. So I have inner peace. I have, quieted that inner critic that was so loud and screaming for so many years. I had also, mastered the art of worry. I'm no longer a worrier, and I really have the ability to be present and to be still, to be still, where I look with wonder at that which is before me. I mean, that's a quote from The Game of Life. I don't know if you've ever heard that book, but to really be in that state of innocence that children are, where you don't have this expectation for things to be a certain way, or this continuum to show up the same way. This person acts this way, I expect them to act that way. No, if you show up with your eyes, and the capacity of wonder, you're letting it unfold the way that it wants to, energetically, without us being locked in on something. So I will say that, inner peace is priceless. As
Yes.
far as happy, yes, I feel so excited about life and what life has to offer, because I used to be so boring and stuck in sickness. Okay. Like I was literally, like I was all about, rigid, structure. And that's no place to live. I don't live there anymore. And I will say too that my little guy, Draven, who is 12, he keeps me young, and he really brought that understanding of, looking at life with the eyes of a child, from that new place, not the old story continuum, not the old patterns of life is hard, life is difficult, and life sucks that a lot of people are, in this place of, and be able to say, you know what, there's so much to be grateful for. There's so much, blessings that are surrounding us at all times. And if we take our eyes off of, what isn't working, and we really showcase our focus on, what is working, and feeling good, and delighting in the simple mundane things. I mean, I love, just sunrise and sunsets and the
Mhm.
stars, and the bees, in the flowers, all these little things that people take for granted. And I did too. I took so much for granted for so many years.
Yeah.
And I can say that, I don't live there anymore. And I really do delight in the simplicity of life. And in the simple is my enjoyment. I don't have to have this fanfare. I don't have to have all this grandiose, experience to really say, you know what, today was magical. Life is magical. And if you can bring that awareness into the simple moments, you made it, because you're really dancing in the energy that life is offering us. And play, we all need to have, more fun
Yeah.
and play in life, whatever that looks like. I think I shared with you, I went skydiving a couple
That
of
to
weeks
me is
ago.
insane. Like skydiving.
Wow.
Wow. Like when
Yes.
I was supposed to have a call with you and you're like, oh, we were trying to connect with each other. You were
Yeah.
so amazing and gracious. I just got married and you were so nice to fit me into your schedule. And I asked you like, are you available? You're like, I'm actually going skydiving. How
Yeah.
cool is that that you could
Yeah.
write back to someone on an email? Oh my gosh. So I have mixed feelings about skydiving because, I'm a nurse practitioner
Yeah.
and I have three
Yeah.
kids. So I was thinking about this when you said that to me, and I'm like, that's so risky. But in this grand scheme of things, it probably isn't compared to, driving a car every day. We're taking a risk, right? But tell me about that.
Yeah.
I have so
All
many
right.
other
I,
questions
I
I
can't
thought
wait
of
to tell
because
you about that
you just said
too.
so many things that awakened my soul. And as you were talking, I actually felt like I was going into a meditative state, and I'm picturing right outside my house the rose bush that I have, and how now when I get home, I'm like, I'm not home a lot because I'm busy. I'm living this life that's amazing, and I work so hard. And I'm like, I pay for this house. The mortgage is hefty, but I also have
Enjoy it.
trees.
Yes. Yes.
I have
Enjoy
trees.
it.
I have roses.
Yes.
Someone before me, when I bought this house, they loved roses and they planted roses, and there's a pear tree. And when I look at it, because it's so far in view, I really like it's such a state where I stop and I'm like, oh, I'm like, I could feel the pedal, and I feel like almost like just like you said, this inner peace that, and I feel overwhelmed with joy that I'm here to experience those simple things. I could literally hear the sound of the buzz, and I've been stung by bees 1,000 times, unfortunately. So, but I'm not mad at them anymore.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. My
like you
son
said,
was actually stung. He just started cross country, and
yeah.
his very first meet, on the first half of the
Ah.
lap, he was stung by a bee, only the second time ever in life, and still, kept going and came in second overall. So,
That's because he had a mission. See, this is what
yes,
happens.
he
The bee's not
did.
going to slow you down when you have a mission. My
Mhm.
daughter is the same way because she got fell off the balance beam, got had to get stitches in her head, and was freaking out about that. But on the car ride home, she like clenched her teeth and she said to me, and at the time she was like, only 8 years old, like, I am gonna uh be in that competition in 6 weeks. I'm not listening to that, ER doctor about not going, right?
Yeah.
So that
Determination, persistence.
purpose,
Absolutely.
purpose
Yeah.
is so important. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I have so many happy and amazing thoughts from everything you just said. But now that we're talking about skydiving,
Yeah, so I can't
I
wait. I
gotta
can't
hear your
wait to
story
share
on
this.
this.
Yes. Okay. So I will say this, that I actually, the first time I ever jumped out of a plane, I was 18. Okay. So
Wow.
I loved roller coasters. I loved, all of that, as a young girl. And I did a static line jump. So I actually jumped out of the plane by myself, without any instructor. I was hooked up to the plane.
That was your first jump?
Yeah, 18. So So, and basically it was like a 2 second free fall and then the chute opens, but you're trained for about 4 or 5 hours during the day that you have a backup chute if that doesn't work, that you have a, okay. So that was me, right? Again, I loved, I mean, scuba diving, all these different experiences very, very young. Then I became a mom. I got married at 22 and I had my girls at 24 and 25. Everything changed then, okay? Because now I had this, responsibility, this overwhelming sense of
Right.
responsibility to care for somebody other than myself. And I went just the opposite, okay? I now was terrified of the swings for my kids to go on, or if we went to the fair or something, like even the
Yeah.
Buccaneer, like I was like, trying to hold them down because I had this overwhelming fear that something bad was going to
Your
happen, that
loss.
something
Yeah.
was, going to happen. They would slip out, from, that. Even to the point where, if I was in the mall that had several, lower levels, that I didn't even want to like lean over and see what was down there because I just had this, this overwhelming fear, that I didn't feel safe, that I didn't feel safe. And what's so interesting about that is that I know that that is what interfered with my sleep. I know now that that was literally the pattern and the program that kept me hyper vigilant and awake because I was always like scanning to make sure everybody was okay. Right. I was
Yes.
always scanning, and staying alert so that, I was aware that everybody was where they should be and everything was okay. So again, change that program. That was one of the first things that I absolutely knew my life was going to be different when I actually downloaded the program. I am safe. I feel safe. I know that I'm safe because now I can show up into life without being guarded, without being constricted and not living, in the experiences that I want. So then I, once I, changed those programs, then I now was inviting going back to, the roller coasters and things like that, and having more joy and fun in these experiences. And then I actually had a trip with a friend of mine. We were going to go to Key West, and this was another me totally, coming out of my comfort zone because he fell ill. He actually came down with E. coli poisoning the night
Okay.
before. And I had never traveled by myself. I had never even gone to a restaurant by myself, and sat. I always went with somebody. So last minute, he calls sick, and I had two choices. The condo was non-refundable. I certainly could have postponed my flight, but I basically said, you know what? I know nothing about Key West, but let's go. So I completely, busted through all of my, my barriers and my comfort zones, and I went on a solo vacation by myself. As soon as I went into the condo, I saw an advertisement for Skydive Key West. And I was like, oh Lord, here we are, So I messaged my girls. My girls are older, they're in their 20s, and they're like, don't you dare do it, Mom. You're there by yourself. We worry about you. So of course I
Aw.
didn't say anything to them until I shared with them the video of me landing and my experience. And it was so exhilarating. I will say this too. I never even had an iota of fear up there because I knew that this is something that I was, wanting to do for so long. There was nobody that was telling me not to do it, other than them being here, but not knowing that I was doing it by myself. And even just being there solo on a trip alone, was me showing up in such a different way. And
Wow.
and then I had a participant, 76 years old, young, who came to my workshop, and her action step to step into the belief change that she was working on. She said, I want to go skydiving. She's like, will you go? And I said, are you serious right now? I said, is that really your action step to be able to blast through that fear of yours? And she said, yes. So that's what happened 2 weeks ago. She came up from DC, and she jumped out of a plane at 10,000 feet for the first time, and it was my third jump. And it was, as exhilarating and liberating and exciting as the first time. It's pretty spectacular. You just feel on top of the world, and you're taking it all in. Like you're just taking it all in. As you're coming down when the chute opens. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I feel like I guess, that you're really doing something for yourself and you're at peace with who you are because I think a lot of people when they think about skydiving, right? They think what happens if I die, right? Because that's one of those intimate things like right that is a risk, right? That it's such a heavy thing to do like to jump and does the parachute open and does everything go on time? But if you're really in self peace with yourself, and you have that inner peace, you really believe, you're okay if you're not there because you're not leaving anything behind because you've arrived, right?
And I think too, faith and trust. I will say
Faith
this,
and
I have
trust.
such faith and trust in my divine plan in
Oh,
again, being here and showing up the way that I show up, that I'm not limiting myself, through experiences. I'm allowing myself to step into new experiences. So never ever, did it cross my mind, oh, I could die, or, that this would
okay.
happen. But I will say this, and I
Because
even
you
said it.
trust your divine plan.
Yeah, but I will say this. I did say this to the group. They share this basic disclaimer before you're about to jump, that literally, if you are not in this state of, peace and just opportunity, you're gonna say, nope, not doing it. Okay, because it's all fear mongering. It's all fear mongering about all these things that could go wrong and liability and all of that. And I just said, again, that didn't deter me at all, because again, I have such faith and trust in, feeling like I'm being led, in the way that I'm supposed to be showing up. And really, I'm so intuitive, and I can energetically feel if I felt like something was going to, be off, or something was off, I wouldn't have jumped. Like I just feel like I have this place of protection, and this place of, just opportunity, opportunity. But feeling safe is so critical, for us. And I'll just give you a quick story. I don't know how we are on time, but I actually had a woman that reached out to me. This is many, many years ago. And she had shared that she was in the 9/11. Okay. She was in 9/11 towers. And from that moment on, she had, what was it? Complex. I knew it started with a C,
Yeah.
complex, post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. So essentially from that point on, her life was that of fear. She said she always had shoot like sneakers on. She couldn't go anywhere without scanning where the exits were. And this was like
Mm,
20 some years of her literally like not living anymore. She had all these illnesses, all these different things that showed up because she was always in fear and always, constricted. And her sister had experienced, this work in Florida. So here she is, she's like, just hearing your excitement on the phone made her drive 3.5 hours, to come for a
oh,
session.
wow.
And literally in just two experiences in a matter of minutes, she literally said to me, she's like, oh my goodness, what just happened? And I said, you tell me. And she's like, Joanne, she's like, I've done the work. I've done all these different, programs and processes. And in this moment right now, I literally feel like the fear was surgically removed from my body, and that
Mm,
she's like, I could for the first time go to ground zero. So not only, and then I saw her face too, because her eyes lit up. She looked like she was 20 years younger. And I even said to her, I said, go look in the mirror and see yourself. And she didn't see what I saw, but I'm telling you, it was pretty remarkable. And then I messaged her
probably
later.
saw her spirit come out.
Yeah, like I messaged her later, and just said, checking in, because it was a miracle. Like it was so profound what I experienced, there with her. And it took her days to actually reach out to me. I was like, huh, like I know what I witnessed, I know what took place with her. And then finally she reached out to me, I want to say maybe 4 days later, and she said, I apologize for my delay. She said, but I am now acclimating to a brand new life, Joanne. She's like, you have no idea. For over 20 years, I've lived in fear. And here I
Mm,
am, in this new opportunity to join life again. And what she shared is that, she drove to her sister's. She came from upstate New York, and she said she drove 3.5 hours. And the first thing that her sister said to her when she opened up the door is, where have you been? You look 20 years younger.
mm.
20 years
Wow, all
younger.
that weight came off of her.
Yes, like it was like the sparkle came back into her
Yeah,
eyes, and she was now inviting life, in opportunity and not fear. Fear is absolutely a constriction, and doubt and worry. These rob us of showing up in life. So we can, energetically come out of that into faith and trust, and showing up differently. Life is different. It's a level of
yeah,
consciousness. A lot of people are in resentment and anger and
yeah.
blame and shame and all of those things because of what life has has created and happened to them. And they're real. I've been there. I know what that feels like. But I also know that when we're able to change those, energetically into contentment and opportunity and joy and inner peace and all these other things, that life literally changes. It really is amazing how powerful we are when we step into it, where it's almost like we feel like, it's riding on the magic carpet, because when we change ourselves, life
Mm,
changes.
yes. Wow, that's so powerful. I mean, I have so many thoughts going in my head, and I was just thinking when you were talking about her story. I want to say, as someone who, has worked in emergency medicine and does work right now with people facing hard decisions, to go on dialysis and take care of their health and stuff like that, is I want to say that to her, it's like you've already experienced the worst thing that could happen to you. And logically, how many times could something so horrific happen? And throughout my life, from the work that I've done, um, I've been able to say, the worst thing has already happened to me. And I actually take comfort in that. Like if I've survived something so traumatic, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I take it as a superpower and think, I survived, people I love dying and different types of abuse that, seem horrific, but I did that. It's already happened. So I actually don't have to worry about the worst thing happening because the worst thing did happen. And I'm here and I'm thriving and I'm having a conversation about it. And I love how you tied that into the skydiving and how you helped that 76-year-old woman, because I have to tell you, one of the things I tell people all the time, and it sounds a little crazy, is today's a good day to die. And I got that from Deepak Chopra. And I was thinking that as you were doing your jump, he talks about how you have to die before you die to realize there's no death. And what that means is letting go of the parts of yourself that don't allow you that inner peace and freedom and that
Absolutely.
fear. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll say to like someone I know really close, like, today's a good day to die. Like I feel totally at peace. I don't want to die. I too believe that there's a divine plan for me. And even if I was to die tomorrow, I'd still plant an apple tree for somebody else. So I'm at peace. I
Yeah.
have this peace. And the more I talk to wonderful people like you, it just, solidifies that peace. And I have to say, recently I experienced something that I was very curious of asking you about, because you really do have to do this work. Like this is essential to do this work, because I went to visit my father. He's in a rehab right now, and it was a little bit of a challenge for me to see him at times. Still take care of him and I still am there for him. But we had a very torturous childhood, and it's a lot of trauma for me at times. And he actually doesn't remember if I go or not. So he's not like upset if I don't show up. But I had shown up with two of my three children, and he, out of nowhere, 2 minutes after arriving, and he wasn't really sure who my son was or my younger daughter was and what their names were, but he knew exactly who I was. And he looked at my son and he said to him, she's such a beautiful, um, intelligent woman. And he said it in a very childlike way, and he over enunciated everything because he has, a lot of dementia. And he said, I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you. And I thought it was really interesting that he's still, at this point, 81 years old, um, hasn't resolved that. And he's said that to me when I was younger as well, but he felt the need to say that. And I think that it's so interesting that if you do not get into these subconscious thoughts and heal yourself, you know, you will still tell yourself that same story, even if parts of your brain, die off and you do have dementia. I really am now fascinated with learning more about that.
Yeah. I will say, and thank you for that too, because, forgiveness at the subconscious level of mine is absolute, bliss. And what I mean by that is that, we all carry traumas and resentments and guilt and blame and shame, from life experiences, and even about ourselves. We wish we could have done it differently, or we wish we could have,
Mm,
showed up more or done more. So when we at the subconscious level of mind, truly forgive ourselves and forgive every single person, and this is the key too, which is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, that everybody does the best that they can from where they are. Okay, from where they are. They also had
Yeah.
traumas. They also had experiences where that basically showcased out, that output in the way that they treated you. But when you understand too, the way that it works in the universe and just, in life in general, being a spiritual, being, the work that you're doing, now, Stefanie, and that I'm doing, that's literally going forward and backward in generations. We are doing generational healing when we actually are, letting go of those, painful experiences and letting go of all of those, heavy, patterns in our lives. And we're creating that forward for our children and their children and generations, ahead of us. But so many people that that come, they say, "Oh, I've done so much forgiveness work," and then they realize, no, it's still a live wire. It's still this this active place. And forgiveness, a lot of people get mixed up on understanding it. Forgiveness is for you, okay? Forgiveness is
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
you allowing yourself to no longer feel the energy of heaviness and burden around something that happened in the past. Okay. It literally puts you in charge of saying, in this moment, I'm able to create a different way of seeing things, and I'm not pulling this, with me. So you're not condoning the behavior. You're not
Right.
saying it was okay. You're not saying that anything that's enhancing it being an experience. It's that this was the experience, and I no longer have to energetically carry that experience in a way that is negatively affecting me. And
Right.
that is literally when you can cut the live wire. I mean, again, cut the live wire to these trauma responses. They're no longer there. Like, it's unbelievable how you feel light, you feel buoyant,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the density that people are living in is so daunting. It's so daunting. Life is, so different when we let go of the traumas and we let go of those painful experiences energetically. I mean, Bruce Lipton talks about this is energy psychology, to energetically, like, change that program and download new programs. It's a different experience
Yeah,
altogether.
and I also, it doesn't mean that now I need to visit more often. It doesn't mean that I wish I spent more time in the past. It doesn't have to all of a sudden take on a new life. And I think that's where the line is blurry. People think, "Oh, he was so nice to me. I feel so guilty that maybe I didn't invite him somewhere or I didn't show up sooner." But there's a reason for
Yeah.
all of those things, and you have to trust the process. What you said was the key of where you are now, meeting him now. I am
Yes.
not meeting him back at a 15-year-old girl or 8-year-old
Yep.
girl. You have to also be realistic of where you are, because sometimes people will then go back to the old story and say, I got hurt all over again.
Yeah.
I should have
Yeah.
known better. Forgiveness does not mean that you have a new action to now try to pretend and repair something or recreate something.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
pretending it doesn't do anything, right? I mean, pretending is fake. So you
Right,
have
like,
to
oh, my
be,
dad was so
yeah,
great. No, we have such a great
yeah,
relationship now that we're older. That's great for some people if you have
yeah.
enough time or energy or maybe different circumstances. But I think that's hard to say is, yes, I can forgive you, but I don't need to participate
And that's
in
where you get to decide. You get to decide completely, what is, best for you. What is the best decision forward for you to, no longer carry, no longer carry the weights. Have you ever heard, the backpack of woes, right? The backpack of woes, it's like, every brick, every trauma, every experience, we're literally energetically like being bogged down. If we can literally take these boulders out of our backpack
Yeah.
and just show up, in life, it's a different life experience. But I
Yeah,
will
that's
say,
why I'm not buying a weighted vest just yet.
yeah, right. I don't have one either. But I will say this too, because it's interesting that you were talking about Deepak Chopra, about to die. That I have a like a different take on, and I don't think it was Deepak
Okay.
that it for me it was Eckhart. And again, these are
Oh,
just
I love Eckhart too.
Eckhart, yes, and it's basically, and again, I'm paraphrasing. It's not
Sure.
exact, but when you die to the old version of you in each moment, that is when you're showing up. And that's what I mean by changing those programs, changing those downloads. When you die to the old version of you, you're not carrying that old story that's interfering with you showing up in life. Now, you can keep all the self-enhancing and all the downloads, all the good experiences, because they're supporting you. They're allowing you to, to be your best self and to show up authentically in that way. But it's all the old things that, when you keep thinking about them, and even if you don't think about them, that's the whole thing, that we have these experiences at the subconscious level of mind that we haven't even thought about for 30 years. But energetically, they're still robbing us of living our best life because the story is, you're not good enough, or you're terrible, you're a terrible public speaker, or you don't deserve to be successful, or you're not worthy of love, or any of these other programs that literally interfere with us being able to be ourselves and show up in a way that feels good.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, as we come to a close, is there one thing you can tell the listeners to do today to help them just to reset?
I would say the simplest way to reset is to give yourself the opportunity to go out in nature, find a spot. You talked about the roses. Absolutely. Even if you just, take a moment to close your eyes and to think about the gifts and the blessings in your life, even if it's something small. If it seems like there's so much heaviness and so much wrong, there's always so much that we can be grateful for. So if we take a pause and we allow ourselves that space to be grateful and to show gratitude for a simple thing. It could be a hot cup of coffee, right? It could be,
Yeah,
anything at all. The more that you do that and you just give yourself that space to slow down, it's magic. And then keep doing that. Keep giving yourself that opportunity to find and delight in the simple things that surround us all the time. We tend to
that's so
forget it.
beautiful.
We tend to forget it.
We do. So, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work that you do?
So my website, it's InnerBalances.com. So I actually work in private session. So I actually have a home office actually here. This is my home office in Milford, New Jersey. So I'm in Hunterdon County. So I do work in person, and I also work remotely worldwide, over Zoom. And I also teach in-person workshops. I actually teach 4 different levels of in-person workshops for somebody who wants to learn this to work with themselves. When I started, facilitating sessions and people were having these incredible shifts, I was just blown away knowing that this is what I was here to do. But the reason why I decided to become an instructor was for them to have the tools in their hands so that they don't need to book a session with me, that they don't need to come ask for assistance, that they actually had the capacity to be able to continue working with themselves. And if they decided to help others as well, to again take their power back, step into the magic and the deliciousness of life. That's literally an inside job. And the more that we do that, the better the world is. So many people are playing it small and they don't realize how important they are. Because when you feel good, everybody that comes into contact with you is better for it. Better
So
for
true.
it, whether it's the gas attendant or the clerk or the waiter. If your energy is more inviting and you have this openness, it's just, it's like a wavelength, a ripple effect that really opens up the opportunity for them to do it too, because it feels, the connectedness of life. So again, Inner Balances, email Joanna at InnerBalances.com is an email for me. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and I will link all of your information to this session. Thank you so much for your time today. I absolutely love you. I think you're an amazing person, and I definitely felt so many good neurons and energy
That's the
flowing through
truth
my
serum,
head.
right? The goosebumps, like that's my truth serum. It's like you're onto
Yes.
something when your goosebumps are flaring up, right?
Yes, the lights went off and everything was firing. I felt like all this energy and I was
I
thinking
love it.
about all these great self-fulfilling thoughts and
Yeah.
philosophies and affirmation that, we're meant to be here and be happy, and I appreciate your time so much.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation and to, allow me this opportunity and to also too, to share in your energy and your,